While reviewing and using the reviewing packet as you see set up, you'll notice that there is the overall era topic, here seen as the Young Republic, and the dates from 1789 to 1825. As you go into the chart, you see that it is broken into its president of that time era and the key concepts, key events, or key terms that occur during that time period as well. As you start to review these materials, though, you can also notice that they can be classified by themes, whether that be economics, government, foreign policy, geography, culture or social, technology, intellectual. Sometimes we remember these as Sprite, where the S stands as the social, the P is the political, R is the religious, I is the intellectual, T is the technology, and E is the economics. And this can help us to organize the terms and the events in a way that will help us also recall them. For example, in this George Washington era, from 1789 to 1797, you see that the Judiciary Act and the Cabinet both play a role under political or government. Then you see Hamilton's financial program with the Bank of the United States, the Tariff of 1789, whiskey tax, followed by rebellion. These three all have a relationship to economics. And as we look at the other aspects of this time period, we see the Neutrality Proclamation, dealing with the wars with France and England, the Jay and the Pinckney treaties, George Washington's farewell address, and some of the advice that he would give us. And then skip down and you can see that there's the Treaty of Greenville. Well, all of these deal with foreign policy or politics and government. And if you see, we have one item left, and that is the growth of Democratic and Republican parties. This too would fall under the political. Now, with this in mind, to help us summarize and refresh our memory about what these things and what role these items play, we can now summarize their effect and their addition to our society. For example, the Judiciary Act set up our judicial branch, its judges, and the Cabinet set up its advisors. So we see here that summarized, these show us that judgeships and the judicial branch just set up. And you can see that the Cabinet refers to the President's advisors. Both in the realm of politics. Now, as we look at the economic aspects, we start to remember that this was a time period where our country was new. We had millions of dollars of debt. Each state had its own debt. And most of that debt can be traced right back to us establishing our independence from England in the American Revolution. But now, how could we pay off those debts? How could we convince other countries that we were strong enough economically to trade with? And how could we establish revenue coming into our country's government to help us survive and thrive as a nation? Well, that's what we find here. And the first step was going to be in Alexander Hamilton, who became our Secretary of the Treasury, and his role in establishing the Bank of the United States. Now we see that the Bank of the United States would set us up in what we might now term to be a very supply side economics based, in which our money and our country could be based more on business, manufacturing. Instead of the Jeffersonian way of farming. Now, we were still a nation of farmers, but in such regions as the Northeast and our coastal ports, manufacturing was going to get its foothold. In order to protect that manufacturing and to bring in revenue to our government, to help pay off that debt, and to maintain our government, that's when we see the initiation of our tariffs. Now, what does a tariff do? It protects our own business and a tariff brings in revenue. Now, we would still rely on new trading partners like England, perhaps even France, as Hamilton would like it to be England. Now, Jefferson thought more on the lines of France, not to mention that France was our ally in our American Revolution. But we need to establish the revenue and our own manufacturing in order to increase that trade and increase our economy. And the tariff would help us do that. And then, of course, there was the infamous whiskey tax, known as a sales tax in modern terms, but in this case, on one aspect of our society, which some people believe to be sinful, hence the sin tax, but it would affect the people. And the people is what our government was based on protecting. So it would bring in revenue, but it would also lead to rebellion. Now, this was a true test of our government. For those people who relied upon the sale of whiskey for their livelihood, for their survival, they would rise up. And the question was, could the government stand this test? And we gave a show of strength. Now, that show of strength was going to mean 15,000 or so troops sent to the parts of western Pennsylvania where a majority of these whiskey makers and whiskey sellers were living and were now rebelling. And this rebellion was more symbolic in its end. Very few people were hurt. Several people were arrested. But overall, the government showed that it had the power to help the people, protect the people, and also keep the order in our new nation.